The sound of the glass door closing was the loudest noise in the world. Inside the car, there was a heavy, dense silence that seemed to steal the air from her lungs. Helena stared ahead at the traffic that wasn't moving, but all she could see was the reflection of her son Arthur's face in the rearview mirror. 24 years of quiet genius, crumbling in the passenger seat. Today's rejection was the cruelest yet. The recruiter, a man with a polished smile and empty eyes, said the words that echoed in the car like poison. "Your honesty is disconcerting, and your lack of interest in team activities concerns us. You don't seem like a team player." Arthur hadn't been rejected for lack of competence. He was rejected for being himself. Before we continue with this journey, tell us here in the comments which city you are watching us from. We want to feel you close to us. And if you believe that stories like Arthur's need to be told, subscribe to the channel, because what's coming next will change your perception of what real value is. Helena turned on the radio, but the music seemed offensive. She turned it off. Silence was better. It was in the silence that she could hear her own thoughts, a torrent of memories and frustrations that took her back to the beginning of it all. Arthur was never an easy child, not for a world that demands smiles in exchange for affection and empty conversations as proof of connection. He didn't point at things he wanted. He just stared, with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the object. The other mothers at the playground kept their distance. "He's so serious," they said. "He doesn't play." But Arthur did play. It was just that his world was different. His games were based on patterns, on the intrinsic logic of things. He didn't stack blocks to build a castle. He organized them by color, size, texture, creating a visual symphony that only he understood. At 7, while his classmates were learning to add, Arthur already understood the concept of prime numbers, drawing spirals in his notebook that Helena would later discover were representations of the Ulam spiral. The diagnosis of autism came as a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it was a name for Arthur's private universe. On the other, it was a label that society would use to limit him. "He's going to have difficulties," the experts said. "We need to prepare him for the world." And so Helena's battle began. A silent and exhausting war to teach her son to pretend. Classes and more classes on social skills. Training to learn to look people in the eye, even though eye contact hurt him physically, as if 1,000 needles were piercing his retinas. He learned the script. "Hello, how are you? The weather is nice today, isn't it?" Each sentence was a line of code that he executed without understanding the purpose. A Herculean effort that left him exhausted at the end of the day. She saw him at night in his room, reading quantum programming books for pleasure, and felt a deep pain. They were trying to turn a genius into someone average just so he would fit into a box that wasn't his. Adolescence was a minefield of anxiety and isolation. College was an oasis of knowledge, but a social desert. He graduated with honors, the best computer science student, but his degree seemed like a useless piece of paper in the face of the job market. The search for a job became an ordeal. Each interview was a new chapter of humiliation. Helena set up a veritable operations center at home. She bought books on body language, printed lists of the 10 most common interview questions, and spent sleepless nights rehearsing with Arthur. "Son, when he asks you about your hobbies, don't say that you catalog security flaws in open-source operating systems. Say that you like movies and music." Arthur looked at her with genuine confusion. "But I don't like movies, Mom. The sound is too loud and people eat popcorn with their mouths open. It's sensory. Torture. And why would I lie? Isn't the truth the most efficient way?" They hired a career coach, a man who charged a fortune to state the obvious. Arthur needs a firmer handshake. He needs to smile more. He needs to tell a story that connects him to the interviewer. It was a recipe for disaster. At the next interview, Arthur shook the manager's hand so hard, following the instruction, that the man grimaced in pain. He tried to smile, but the result was a tense, artificial mask that scared the HR woman. And the story? The story he told was about how he optimized his home garden irrigation system using a predictive algorithm based on humidity data, saving 70% of water. The silence that followed was deadly. They wanted to hear about how he overcame a challenge by working as part of a team, not about how he talked to sensors and data. With each no, a piece of Arthur's soul seemed to break. "We're looking for a more dynamic profile. He doesn't seem to fit our company culture." "Thank you for your time, but we'll be moving forward with another candidate." The phrases were always the same, a cruel euphemism for, "He's too weird for us." Helena saw the sparkle in her son's eyes fade. The young man who could see the future in lines of code was beginning to believe he had no future at all. Hope became poison, a promise that never came true, leaving behind only the bitter taste of failure and the pain of being misunderstood on a fundamental level. The interview at Innovate Solutions was supposed to be different. It was a cutting-edge tech startup, the kind of place that, in theory, should value genius over superficiality. Arthur spent weeks preparing. He didn't just study the company, he dissected its products, found vulnerabilities in its online security system, and developed a patch to fix them on his own. He wasn't going to the interview empty-handed. He was bringing solutions. The interviewer's name was Klaus, a man who epitomized corporate efficiency. Impeccable hair, well-tailored suit, smile that didn't reach his eyes. Klaus wasn't interested in the 30-page dossier Arthur had prepared. He barely glanced at the young man's notebook. He started with the usual question, "Tell me a little about yourself." Arthur, trying to follow the script he had rehearsed with Helena, began to talk about his education. Klaus interrupted him. "No, not your academic background. I want to know about you. What drives you? What are you passionate about?" Arthur was silent for a moment. The question was illogical, too abstract. He decided to tell the truth. "What drives me is solving complex problems. The search for elegant patterns in chaotic systems. My passion is creating clean, efficient, and secure code. I spent the last 2 weeks analyzing your system and found 3 critical security holes. One of them would allow an SQL injection attack that could expose all of your customer data. I wrote the code to fix it. It's right here." Klaus looked at Arthur as if he were an alien. There was a mixture of shock and irritation on his face. He didn't see an offer of help. He saw a threat, a breach of protocol. "Mr. Kowalski," he said, his voice cold, "your initiative is remarkable, but a bit presumptuous, don't you think? We have entire teams dedicated to that." The rest of the interview was a sham. Klaus asked questions about teamwork, about how Arthur handled interpersonal conflicts, about his participation in team-building events. Arthur's answers, always literal and honest, only deepened the chasm between them. "I don't participate in happy hours. The noise and amount of simultaneous social stimuli cause me sensory overload. I prefer to use that time to study new programming languages." The rejection came at the end of the conversation. Klaus didn't wait for the standard email from HR. He decided to give his feedback in person, perhaps as a form of punishment for Arthur's audacity. "Arthur, you're clearly intelligent, but Innovate Solutions is a family. We have lunch together, we celebrate birthdays together. Success here isn't just about code, it's about connection. And with all due respect, you don't seem capable of connecting." There was no pure malice in Klaus's gaze. It was something worse, a total misunderstanding, a rigidity of thought that prevented him from seeing the genius right in front of him. He wasn't a villain. He was just a guardian of a broken system, a system that preferred a fake smile to a brilliant mind. That day was rock bottom. Arthur came home, and for the first time in years, Helena saw him cry. They weren't loud tears, but a silent tremor that shook his entire body. He didn't say anything. He just went to his room and closed the door. Helena sat in the kitchen, her heart in 1,000 pieces, feeling like the worst mother in the world for forcing him to go through all that. But inside the room, something different was happening. The pain and humiliation mixed with intellectual frustration. Arthur's logic couldn't process the stupidity of the situation. How could a technology company ignore such an obvious security flaw? Klaus's rejection, instead of breaking him, ignited a spark of indignation. He didn't want the job. He wanted them to see that they were wrong. Driven by an impulse that was not social but purely logical, Arthur opened his laptop. He cleared the file, removed any mention of the job interview, and wrote an email. It was short, direct, and impersonal. He addressed it to a generic email address he found on the company's website, contatoinnovatesolutions.com. The subject line was, "Urgent Security Vulnerability Notification." In the body of the email, he explained the 3 flaws in a technical, precise manner and attached the file with the correction code. He asked for nothing in return. He didn't introduce himself, just the pure information. He hit send and, feeling a little relief at having corrected an asymmetry in the universe, turned off his computer. Thousands of miles away in an office overlooking the city, Jean-Pierre Dubois, the founder and CEO of Innovate Solutions, was in his own crisis. He had just left a meeting where his directors presented reports full of colorful graphs and corporate jargon that meant nothing. He felt that his company, which was born out of innovation and boldness, was drowning in bureaucracy. Tired, he opened his contact email inbox, something he hadn't done in months. It was his ritual for reconnecting with the real world, with customers. He deleted dozens of spam and complaints until one subject caught his eye. Urgent security vulnerability notification. He opened it, skeptical, and he began to read. His skepticism turned to astonishment and astonishment to admiration. It wasn't a threat or an extortion attempt. It was a report, a clearer, more accurate, and more brilliant report than anything his expensive cybersecurity team had produced in a year. He opened the attachment. The code was elegant, a work of art. There was no name, no resume, just the solution. Jean-Pierre felt adrenaline he hadn't felt in years. This was genius in its raw form. He forwarded the email to his IT boss with a simple order. Find out who sent this now. 2 days later, Helena's phone rang. It was an unknown number. She answered, ready to dismiss yet another telemarketer. Hello, could I speak to Arthur Kowalski? This is Jean-Pierre Dubois. Helena almost dropped the phone. The name sounded familiar. She quickly searched Google. He was the founder of Innovate Solutions. Her heart raced. The conversation was not an interview. Jean-Pierre did not ask Arthur about his hobbies or teamwork. He had only one question. The email you sent it, how did you find that? Arthur, without the pressure of eye contact, explained his process over the phone. His voice was calm, methodical, passionate. Jean-Pierre listened, fascinated. At the end, he said, forget my HR's selection process. They're paid to find parts that fit the engine we already have. I need someone to help me build a new engine. Can you start on Monday? The first victory was Arthur's silence when he hung up the phone, followed by a single small smile. The first genuine smile Helena had seen in months. The second victory was entering the Innovate Solutions building, not through the front door for an interview, but with an employee badge, being taken directly to Jean-Pierre's office. The third, and perhaps sweetest, came on Wednesday. Klaus, the interviewer, was in an emergency meeting with Jean-Pierre and the directors. The agenda was the security breach that had been miraculously discovered and corrected. Jean-Pierre then said, I would like to introduce you to the man responsible for saving us from a multi-million-dollar disaster. This is Arthur Kowalski, our new senior security analyst. Klaus's jaw dropped. His look, a mixture of panic, confusion, and a spark of humiliation, was a silent but powerful victory. Arthur's victories continued. They weren't big and loud. They were small and meaningful. A colleague who, instead of trying to make small talk, simply handed him a coffee and said, Good job on yesterday's report. Permission to wear noise-canceling headphones in the office without having to explain himself. The joy of being given a problem that everyone else considered impossible and solving it in an afternoon. For the first time, Arthur wasn't just being tolerated. He was being valued for who he was. The transformation didn't just happen to Arthur but to everyone around him. Helena, for the first time in 24 years, felt a peace she didn't know was possible. The relentless struggle was over. She no longer had to be her son's translator to the world. The world, or at least a small piece of it, had finally learned to speak his language. She stopped worrying about whether he was smiling or making eye contact. She simply saw him come home, tired but not exhausted. There was a lightness about him, the lightness of someone who had finally found his place, his purpose. She realized that her mission had never been to fix her son, but to love and protect him until he found a space where he could flourish on his own. And he found it. Jean-Pierre also went through a period of deep reflection. Arthur's case was a reality check. He looked at his own company and saw the truth that Klaus represented. A system designed to perpetuate mediocrity, to hire copies of himself, rewarding conformity over genius. He realized that his hiring process, with its questions about cultural fit and interpersonal skills, was a fishing net with huge holes, letting the rarest and most valuable fish slip away. He wasn't just hiring people. He was building a culture And the culture he had allowed to grow was one that would have discarded the young Steve Jobs, the awkward Bill Gates, the intense Alan Turing. He started a quiet revolution. Within Innovate Solutions, creating a new recruitment program focused on practical skills assessment and test projects, eliminating subjective interviews for technical positions. He didn't do it out of charity. He did it out of a desire for survival and excellence. Genius, he understood, rarely comes in a conventional package. Arthur, for his part, reflected in his own way. He didn't think in terms of victory or revenge. For him, the world finally began to make sense. It was as if he had spent his entire life trying to plug a device into the wrong outlet. Now someone had finally given him the right adapter. His job wasn't a burden, it was a playground. The company's complex problems were fascinating puzzles. His colleagues were no longer a source of anxiety. They were just variables in a system, people with whom he interacted in a functional and respectful manner. He hadn't changed. He was still Arthur. The difference was that now, being Arthur was more than enough. It was an asset. Arthur's story is not a fairy tale with a perfect ending. Life continues to be a journey with its challenges. He still has days when the world seems too loud and chaotic. Days when the simple task of going to the grocery store feels like an expedition to Everest. The anxiety didn't disappear with a wave of a magic wand. The pain of past rejections hasn't been completely erased. It has become part of his story. Scars that remind him of the resilience he didn't even know he had. Working at Innovate Solutions didn't solve all his problems, but it gave him something invaluable. An environment where his social weaknesses were irrelevant in the face of his intellectual strength. It gave him the dignity of being judged by his work, not by his ability to make small talk. Hope, for Arthur and Helena, does not lie in the idea that one day he will be normal. It lies in the truth that he does not need to be. Hope lies in the existence of more Jean-Pierres in the world, leaders who have the vision to look beyond the resume, beyond the handshake, and see the raw talent that hides behind a different look. The real victory was not the job contract or the salary. It was validation. It was the moment when a man looked at what the world called strange and saw extraordinary. Arthur continues to build new engines for Innovate Solutions, and Jean-Pierre continues to search for other misunderstood geniuses. The pain of the journey was real, deep, and transformative, but the tools they gained, acceptance, purpose, and respect, are even more real. Arthur's happiness does not lie in becoming someone else, but in finally having the freedom to be fully himself and be celebrated for it. Not all talent fits in, but every true genius creates their own space. If this story touched you in any way, if it made you think or feel, please like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. You never know who might need to hear a story like Arthur's today. Sometimes a single story can change the way we see the world.